So let's talk customer types, specifically in bulk trucking. I can talk about some van people, but I don't really do that, and I've never pulled a reefer. So in bulk trucking, you're going to get different customers. Now, you have the single independent guys. Now, this could just be a farmer hiring us to haul something in. There's not as much of that anymore. Most farmers have their own trucks now. You get specialized farmers, specifically organic, non-GMO, where there's going to be a trading company involved that's going to buy the product and sell it to the end user. But you're not going to do a lot of work direct for a farmer anymore. But you might be able to help your neighbor down the street. In general, that kind of work doesn't pay overly well, but it's fun to help your neighbor, and it's fun to do that. So that brings me to your next customer, a trading company. Now, this is going to be real popular, like I said, in the organic grain space. Basically, what they do is they talk to the farmer, the organic farmer, and tell them, hey, you let us take care of your marketing and getting your products where it needs to be. They'll buy it from that farmer at X amount of dollars and say, hey, I will send trucks to pick it up. And then they will contract you as the carrier to go to that yard, to that farmer's place, load this product, and take it to the end user. And in the middle, they make enough margin for what they paid the farmer for it to what they're selling it to the end user to then pay for transportation and a portion for them to make money. So trading companies can be good to work with if their freight matches your geography. We work with quite a few of them. You'll also get it in it's very prevalent in the pet food industries. There's a lot of ingredient trading companies that work to buy product, source it, and then have it delivered to pet food plants. They can provide some really good work and some long-term work. If you get in with the right ones, they can buy you really nice steak dinners at the bulk freight conference. You know who you are. And a lot of those they're doing different types of freight. So we have one trading company we work with. We do hoppers, dry vans, and occasional tanker loads for. So they can be really, really good in that aspect. There's also trading companies that work in the salvage grain area, buying subpar grain from a farmer here and delivering it there. Now, sometimes when you're dealing with that, you're going to experience, they call them blind BOLs. So pause. Okay, so blind BOLs. Now, the way it works is the trading company is going to buy a product from another company, in the case of these pet food plants, and then they're going to sell it to the pet food plant, once again making their margin plus transportation fees in the middle. That's their business, that's what they do. Our job is to move the product in a timely fashion at the agreed upon rate. So what'll happen is when you load at the place of origin, you will get usually a BOL that says sold to, and then it'll have the address of this trading company, which might be completely different. But then your rate confirmation from the trading company is going to include the actual address of where you're delivering it to on their behalf. So it's important to make sure that you keep that relationship good. And there will be times where the trading company, and this happens more in vans, it's not as prevalent in hoppers, but they will not want you to even show the original BOL to the end user because they're trying to protect the source and continue to make their trades. Their concern is if the end user knew exactly where it came from, they would just go around the trader. And you can feel your own ways about the whole thing, but at the end of the day, you're being hired to transport a product from A to B, and if you agree to do it on the blind side, you should honor that commitment and deliver it without revealing where the source is. Additional ones you'll find in bulk freight are the producers. Your main soybean producers, your main DDG producers. In general, that's who we work for primarily, is the producers themselves. That gives you certain benefits of, hey, this plant's going to produce X amount of product per week that we got to get rid of. So one week it might go to this location, the next week it might go to another location. So by working with the producer, you can actually kind of lock in volumes. It might not be the same location, it might be different locations, month to month generally, but it allows you to have a general idea of volume. Downside of that is generally you're working with large corporations. You can create a good relationship there, but at the end of the day, it's a corporation. If you're not the best price, they'll drop you like it's hot until they need you again. Which, if you realize that, you can't really begrudge them. And the person you're going to deal with at these large corporations is generally the low person on the totem pole. A lot of these transportation jobs happen to be entry level, so you'll get a different person every year, maybe 2 years, that you got to then create a new relationship with and develop. And sometimes, I like to teach them stuff about the industry that they're not getting from anywhere else. A lot of times these are college graduates that didn't necessarily be involved in trucking or farming or agriculture. So you can help, kind of educate them on stuff in a nice way of, hey, this is why your soybean meal is seasonal this time of year, fertilizer this time. This is why they use, urea in the spring and MAP and DAP in the fall. You can help them kind of understand the industry. But you also have to understand that their job, their purpose at this company, these corporations, is to get the product moved from A to B as reliably and as cheaply as possible. So they're going to fight you on rates. And don't take it personally, that's their job. If they don't, they suck at their job and they're going to get replaced. So early on in my career, I had some issues with that, and I didn't quite look at it through that lens of, if they're not fighting me on rates, they're not doing their damn job. So it's important to realize that, and realize that you have to be providing that service correctly, or else you will get replaced, because their entire existence at these corporations is to do it as cheaply as possible, but reliably. You don't have to be the cheapest, but if you're not going to be the cheapest option, you need to be absolutely reliable. And that's what we try to build our stuff on here, and we do charge a premium for it, and we have lost lanes because of that premium we charge, but we've also gotten certain lanes because of our reliability. So if there was a scale on what they're doing, you got one axis that's cost per mile, and another that's on time percentage, and they have to find a happy medium in there. Additional customers you could actually get the end user. So the person that's buying it, these feed mills, these co-ops, there are some that, they do more open source transportation, but in general, a lot of them fall under the small town politics rule of, if you didn't know the person that is in charge of transportation, chances of you getting anything is slim to none. Now the bigger ones, they're more corporate, so they're more price conscious, they'll shop around, but there's a certain extent to the good old boy club there in the end users, especially the co-ops, where you got to know somebody, or else you're not gonna get any loads for them. So I would keep reaching out to them and seeing what you can offer, and maybe sometime you get in with them. So far we've got the farmers, we've got trading companies, we've got the producers, we've got the end users, and that's going to be about it for your customers as far as direct. You will have, obviously, the brokers in the middle. Now, there's nothing wrong with brokers. I like to view it as, if you're a one-truck operation and you're using brokers, you're outsourcing your cold calling. Think of it like that. Because you're not going to take the time to call all these people and try to develop this direct freight. Instead, the brokers are. And they get their cut for doing it. Now, some of them can be overzealous and take too big of a cut. Some of them can be clueless in the industry and price stuff too cheaply. Complaining and railing against the system and yada, yada, yada. Brokers, it's really not going to do much for you. Now, personally, we don't use a lot of brokers, and I won't even, if there's a broker offering a load in my geographic area that we cover routinely, I personally will not take that load from the broker, because I know down the road I might want that location as one of my customers, and I don't want to have the conflict of interest of a non-compete clause within a brokerage agreement to hamper us in that in the future. So I personally try not to utilize brokers at this level. When I first got into the industry, yeah, I was utilizing some brokers. I learned a lot. Learned which ones were good and which ones were bad. But luckily on the bulk loads, webpage, there are those ratings. Now, it's important to keep in mind the ratings that are left, the star levels. More than likely, human nature, everybody focuses on the negative. So the people there leaving negative reviews, people don't just, unless it was amazing and they got, X amount of dollars extra kicked in on a load or something, they're not just going to be like, yeah, this company is okay to work for, and give them a positive review. No, it's going to be the guys that had an issue, whether that was because the company self-inflicted, a facility wasn't doing stuff right and they hold it against these people. So always take those ratings with a grain of salt as far as, overall. You read the reviews and see, maybe this is a good fit, maybe this isn't. Now, in the bulk freight industry, especially in the hoppers, you're going to have your freight break down into certain categories. You're going to have your whole grains. That's going to be your soybeans, your corn, your wheat, your canola, your milo, your fresh out of the field grains. Now, in general, your freight is going to move at a relation to what it costs as far as a price. Grains in general don't move that far, and they're heavy and they're lower priced. The primary competition to trucking operations is, of course, the railroad when it comes to grains, or anything that's a dense product. It's heavy, it needs to move long distances, but it's not on a real tight timetable. That's going to go on rail if it can, or if it goes on trucks, the rates are not going to be as good unless it's a specialty product. Then you're going to get feed ingredients. Now, a feed ingredient is going to be something that goes into a feed ration at a feed mill. So for us, we've hauled DDGs, dry distiller grain, soybean meal, linseed meal, canola meal. These are all byproducts of the crushing process. We've hauled, whey protein, powderized whey protein. We've hauled, calcium, salts, lysine, amino acids. There's a lot of different things that can be hauled in a hopper that go into a feed mill, into a feed ration. So, and then there's byproducts, animal byproducts, meat and bone, feather meal, pork meal, and that's the ground up byproduct of the processing of an animal that's then ground up and fed back to the animal, completing the circle of life, if you will. Then you'll have aggregates. Your aggregates are going to be your rock, your sand, those types of things. They will go in hoppers. You got to be a little careful, weather dependent, size. We used to haul a lot of pelletized clay, but sometimes it would be the size of, softballs, and it would dent the crap out of the inside of the trailers. So something to be aware of there. You may not want to haul a product due to the damage it'll do to the inside of your trailer. You have fertilizers. That's going to be your MAP, your DAP, your urea, your AMS, your MES. There's a lot of different types of fertilizer. Those would all be commercially made fertilizers. There's also, we've hauled pelletized chicken manure in hoppers before, pelletized field lime, gypsoil, gypsum, calcium products that go on fields. We've even hauled, it sounds gross, well, it is a little gross, dehydrated human fecal matter, where they take human waste, add yeast to get all the bacteria out, to make sure it's not going to get anybody sick, and then they dry it down, pelletize it, and then they call it, I think milligranate is the actual name. You'll find it in Home Depot listed as an organic fertilizer. It's actually human poop. So all sorts of random stuff there, and then you have your one-off and your weird things too. So there's a wide variety of what you can haul in a hopper. Now, a lot of times you'll have to know, hey, what is the density? So density, for those that don't know, is pound per volume. So a lot of times you'll get a bushel. So a bushel of corn is a designated cubic foot. I think it's 1.2 cubic feet. It's how many pounds of corn fit within a 1.2 cubic feet. Average is 56. So and they call that a test weight. So if you're ever wondering if you can get a full load of a grain, you can just go on the USDA's website. They'll give you a test weight. There's also a long list of density of feed products. So it'll give you, it'll go all the way down to cottonseed, I think 18 pounds per square foot. And you'll be able to use that to kind of work back, as long as you know the cubic feet of your trailer. Now, if you ordered them new, you'll get that. I believe Timpty and Wilson, they publish them on their website. I know Cornhusker, if you just ask, they'll tell you. I believe these trailers are 23 cubic feet at water level, so that's talking about right at the top rail. And then they go to 25, 50 cubic feet heaped 9 inches over the bow. So that'll get you to, hey, if you're ever wondering, hey, can I get a full load of this? If you look up the density, then you'll be able to figure it out if you know how big your trailer is. Now, sometimes densities are wrong. We all DDGs, and there's some plants that are real fluffy, some plants that are real granular, and there's a huge difference in between, total amount of space taken up and what it weighs. It's a rule of thumb. You adjust from there, and that gets back to making sure that you have the correct equipment for the job. You're going to have to price them depending. Now, you've got your types of hoppers. You've got large commodity hoppers like what I have behind me. You have your standard grain hoppers, and you got everything in between. So in general, the main difference between your hoppers are going to come down to total cubic foot. How much space is there inside the trailer? If you're hauling grains, you don't need as much space. Grains and fertilizers, they weigh up really well. You don't need a big trailer. If you're hauling some feed ingredients, they're very fluffy. If you're hauling cottonseed, it's super fluffy. So you need a lot more space in order to get that weight that you're getting paid on per ton. You'll also have a difference in door size at the bottom of the trailer. We call them the traps. The door size. Now, the bigger the door, the easier it is to get product out, but the harder it is to control where it goes. So while a huge door is really good for feed ingredients, it's not as good as let's say getting grain into a swing hopper. because it's so wide, or into a small pit. So the big doors can have a negative when you're doing more farm related work, but as far as commercial bulk hauling, the bigger the door, the better in general. It makes it so much easier to unload. There will be times where your door will be bigger than the pit, and then it creates a mess if you don't pay attention and meter out your product. But in general, the bigger door, the better. You're also going to have a difference in height underneath your trap, so that's clearance underneath. A lot of the commodity hoppers and they call them commodity traps, they're going to only be maybe 14 inches off the ground, which is good if you're dumping commodity out. You got the door fully open, you're letting it go. It's not going to spread all over. Downside, of course, being your clearance. If you're trying to dump into, let's say, a swing hopper, you may not get it underneath, and it may preclude you from doing some work because you're unable to dump into a swing hopper. Also, you know, some off-road stuff, you might not have enough clearance to get over like some railroad tracks. Yeah, and that's later. The later in the day it gets, the more willing they are to just push it a day. You know, if they're not going to find anybody that can deliver on the scheduled day, eventually they're going to have to push it irregardless. So they get to be a lot more open to that idea the longer, you know, the closer it is. So you might be able to push that this afternoon. You know, if they say it's like recycled batteries or something, that's going to destroy a trailer. Obviously, don't take it. And if it's going to be something that they're going to have to nail into the ground, don't take it. You know, if it's going to irritate Brent and hurt his trailer, don't take it. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, oh, they got the big hammer. You don't need a little hammer, we need a big hammer. All right, let's open up this bad boy. So we've got this one. Please hold while I figure out how to do this shit. All right.
How's it going today?
It's going.
What is this, just like self-unloading pretty much?
Yeah.
I've never been here before.
Yeah, so you'll put your ticket in there,
Okay.
and you just dump. It takes it pretty quick.
Just dump. Wait.
I'm making a tutorial for bulkloads.com about how to unload DDGs. So I had to set all the cameras up. So you're on camera right now.
Oh, gotcha.
And there's one in the top of the trailer. It actually goes pretty good here because it'll eat it pretty quick. They give you the big hammer. And then, if you have just the back left, so you're going to want to keep, number one, you want to not be fat. That's the first problem. Woo! Out of shape. But if you have just the back of the trap, you can put it in drive. But then you actually want to stand on the brakes. 9 times out of 10, she'll slide right out. Here, I'll go in the bottom. Some people go through the top. You gotta check with your facility, because not all of them are gonna want you to go in at all. Some of them don't let you climb up the ladders at all. They don't want to see you doing that. So at this point, I'm not entirely certain what the next load will be. It's all line dependent. I'm gonna go to wherever the line's shortest, but I'm gonna sweep out right here over the pit, make sure they get all their product that they ordered. Now my trailers, I order them all with steps. Now steps are good and bad. They provide a place to climb, but they also provide a place for product to get stuck. So you kind of have to pick your poison. I prefer not sliding out the bottom, but that's just me. Now, what's left in here, if I leave the tarp open, drive down the road, Mother Nature will get the rest of it. Some guys will leave the traps open and drive out, but in general, people get really irritated when you do that. And there's a trail of DDGs coming down the road to this place. So I don't ever leave the traps open when I leave a facility. I'll leave the tarp open if it's not raining. But the traps I generally try to avoid. So when you're unloading DDGs, if the pit will accept it, I always open it all the way up, front to back. Now for us, we're running vibrators on the back of the hoppers and on the front, and they're controlled independently on our trailer, so we can choose to do the front or the back. I'll do them both. Now it's not falling. They got the big maul here. I always hit on the knock rails. Don't dent up your slopes. Little drop. Now it's important. Now with mine, you can run them independently, front or back or together. So there I got the front out first, and now the back's going. And it's all dropped. You know, some tips and tricks. You want a big door. Vibrators if you have them. Hammers are just as good, to be honest. But the vibrators definitely help. And then make sure your hoppers are clean. If your slope sheets are sticky with some previous product or something, it won't slide out. It'll just stick there and laugh at you. So I'll go to the other side, and I'll hit the other side with a mallet, and I'll turn my vibrators on before I go. Keep in mind, I still have my truck running with trailer supplied to the air, or air supplied to the trailer. Otherwise, it wouldn't go. These corners here, you should take a little extra. Now, these trailers are set up for commodities. And one of the ways you can tell that is the fact that these rivets go out. Some egg trailers, the rivets will come in, and you'll have them poking up and stopping product from getting out of the trailer. Slopes clean and dry will help. It was raining this morning. It looks like a little moisture got on the slopes while he was loading. I didn't load this one. I sent somebody else to load it. I was interviewing people for jobs. Also, pro tip, wear rubber-soled shoes. Your cowboy boots, your hard-soled work boots, they ain't gonna work in here. You'll slide right out the bottom. Nice grippy rubber soles. So have a pair of tennis shoes with you in the cab for times like this when you have to get in. It'll help you. It'll save work comp claims. It'll be all good all around. So what's left in here will blow out with Mother Nature. Now I take my handle off while I'm running the vibrators most of the time because I don't want it to magically fall in the pit. Same thing with your cell phone. You'll never see it again. So here's Chris, and he is running a tri-axle. Allows them to get more weight. Their vibrator setups, they can actually put them in a bracket here. I've never seen this style where they actually have a pin to hold it. So rather than mine that are hard mounted, these ones are nice because you can pull them off and put them in your cab, keep them out of the salt, but they don't transfer all the energy as well. And of course he brought his own big hammer. If you can get one of those, they help. These little ones will do it, but not nearly as well. And he's running the commodity hoppers with the big doors and wearing ear protection because he's smart and he wants to still hear later in life. Now he's going to check to see what the inside looks like and potentially shake the trailer. So yeah, he's going to hop in. He'll probably, if it's in the front, he'll probably back up a little bit and hit his brakes. If it's in the back, he'll go the opposite way. So he gets a little forward, so it'll run. And see, it's already coming out pretty good. There you go. And then it should all just come right out the bottom. Shaking the truck helps if you can get that hole in the middle. It's by far the easiest way to do it. But you gotta not be a wimp about it. You actually gotta hit the brakes. Still got some in there?
We're good, we're empty.
Okay. And you were Chris?
Yep.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for showing the people how it's done.
Yeah.
And you love DDGs and they're your favorite thing to haul in the entire world, right?
Absolutely love them. Can't get enough of them.
Have a good day, dude.
Have a good day.
Thank you. So overall, that went pretty good. It's not always that easy. I've got nightmares of when we first started this. And honestly, we didn't have the right equipment at the time. And I have sat over that pit with the DDGs from that site for 2.5 hours beating a load out of my trailer. So it can be a real bugger hauling DDGs from time to time. But in general, the things you can do to make it easier, number one, try not to let them sit on the trailer if you don't have to. These were loaded today, about 4 hours ago, and we only went 110 miles or so. If we had to let them sit on a trailer for a long period, they do set up a lot more. I've taken DDGs from Minnesota down to Oklahoma to a feedlot. And while it wasn't the worst experience of my life, it wasn't a very enjoyable one either. So you gotta kind of be careful with when you're choosing them. We as a company prefer not to go to feed mills with, some small pits that you gotta kind of meter it into, because that gets to be a real bear. Stuff like this where you got a big pit, you can open it all the way up, and once it drops, it has a place to drop out. That seems to pull more of the product out at once than when you're trying to do it into a smaller pit and you can only barely get her trickled out. Then it's kind of a real pain. So it's not a bad deal, but I would always, like I say, kind of choose when, where, and how you're going to haul them. I wouldn't take them all willy-nilly, and make sure that you take into account your driver's physical fitness. Now, despite the fact that I'm huffing and puffing and kind of fat, well, I just really like ice cream and cookies. So, sort of fit, sort of fat. Little of both. Dad bod life. I generally will not send my older drivers on DDGs just because I know they might have a real issue getting unloaded, and I don't need one of my drivers to be having a heart attack trying to unload a truck. So especially in the summer, humidity makes them set up a whole lot more. If it's cold in the winter, generally they slide right out. Not that big of a deal, but just things to be aware of is is it a good idea to send your driver on that load? Will they have issues with it? Are they physically fit, physically capable of doing it, or could it result in a real negative? Also, making sure that you have large doors on your hoppers. Trying to do DDGs with small doors when they're sticky, I'm not saying it can't be done, but it gets a lot harder. And you also have to take into account the weight per pound, the density of the product. If you're trying to haul DDGs in a railroad track, a small traditional hopper, like an egg hopper, you'll have a real hard time getting a full load. So if you're going to do that, I'm not saying you can't, but take into account your reduced capacity when you're figuring out a rate, because chances are they're going to figure your capacity at your standard 25 ton or 30 ton depending on your geographic area. And if you don't have the actual cubic yardage to get that type of load in, and you're instead going to only be hauling 20 tons, you have to figure that in and see if it works. But just be aware, that's not the shipper's problem. That's not your customer's problem that you don't have the right equipment for the job. That's your problem, so you have to account for it or get the correct equipment. And that might be a process of learning kind of where you're at. When we first got into the bulk hauling, we were doing it with your traditional egg hoppers. That's how we started, and we kind of figured out where we were running, what we needed for cubic capacity, and then we bought accordingly. Now, my current hoppers, they are 43 feet long, and they are 102 wide, and they're 84-inch sidewalls. So they're really large hoppers, because we used to haul a lot of loose soil hulls. Now, we don't haul nearly as many loose soil hulls as we used to, and I probably, quite honestly, do not need these large hoppers anymore. So when I go to order new ones, I'll take that into account. Now, when we do have the tri-axle trucks where we're running a pusher on the truck and can run 90,000, we do need this big of a hopper in order to get gross weight at 90,000. We do have some 96 wide, 78 tall, 42 foot longs, and depending on your location and your product, you may or may not be able to get a full load on the trailer to go to 90,000. 80,000 is no problem. 90,000 is hard. The flip side is these trailers can generally get, depending on the location, a full load of 25 ton of loose soybean hulls, whereas those 78-inch 96ers, they're only going to get about 20 ton or 18 ton. So, well, we would use those to haul the soy hulls from time to time. It wasn't the ideal. It wasn't what we tried to do. So, those are all things to take into account as you're bidding lanes and deciding if it's something you want to do. It's real important. Also, so that guy behind me, Chris, he came up, he talked, he was jibber jabbering. Those actually came off pretty easy. Sometimes they don't. I had 5 trucks there last week. They pulled out of a DDG plant that I had never hauled out of. And unfortunately, this would be the second week we did it. The first week, nobody actually relayed to me that those DDGs sucked. So I did it again lo and behold, it took 5 of our drivers working in a team like an hour a trailer to get them undone. And they were beating on it, had, you know, vibrators running nonstop. So sometimes it takes an army to make it work. And if you're there and there's people in front of you struggling, get out of your truck and help. Pick up a hammer. And if you're that person struggling and somebody behind you, the truck behind you comes up and helps, when you're unloaded, pull forward, turn around, and go help them. We really need to bring back the camaraderie in trucking, and I think bulk trucking has more camaraderie than most, but be helpful. Help out your fellow truckers. You know, the truck behind me that was unloading technically is competition. You know, they operate in the same region I'm doing, they're doing the same loads. But I can't cover 40 loads into that barge on my own. We did, I think, 10 on this one as a company, so we did a quarter of it. But I don't have the capacity to do all of it, so why would I not want to help the guy behind me? You know, and maybe down the road, he's looking for another job. He's had enough of where he's at, and he thinks back to, hey, you know, that one time I was unloading DDGs and that Grover guy came up, he was real helpful. Maybe they called me for a job, or maybe one of my drivers was helpful, and then the other drivers think, hey, oh, maybe we should go work for them because their drivers are helpful. So it's always nice to help. And when I think of the stories from the road, the fun times in trucking I've had over the years, yeah, it's not, oh, I had the cruise control set driving down the interstate. That's not the fun times. The fun times was the shenanigans that we got into with other drivers and, you know, running places and doing all this stuff. And honestly, the same in the military. All the fun times in the military, none of it was training. It was all, you know, BSing with the guys. So I would just suggest that as you go more and more into trucking and you experience it, back in the day it was a group of guys that helped each other out. And I think it'd be really great if we could get back to that. But you can't help anybody else sitting in your cab. So get out, lend a hand, talk to people, be social. Trucking is a very solitary job, and whether you realize it or not, it can have some serious effects on your mental health. So getting out and at least talking with people on a regular basis makes it not so lonely. Just a random fact. Now this will be Rob's wonderful tips and tricks for driving in city traffic. So right now I'm driving on a 3-lane wide road, so I'm going to be in the middle lane. I don't want to be in the way of all the fast cars, but I also don't want to have to deal with all the merging shenanigans on the right. So I generally get in the middle lane and go the speed of traffic if I can. If not, I maintain a good clip. That way I'm not holding up other people. But I won't camp in the left lane, and I generally try to stay out of the right lane. The middle lane seems to have the best flow so that you can get through the city traffic and on to where you need to go. You know, and another thing is your trip planning. If you can plan ahead so you get through the traffic before or after. Yeah, if I was going to be one of the first people at that barge in the morning to unload, and they start at 7 a.m., I'd actually probably shoot to get there about 6 a.m. just to get through the traffic and be the first in line, because that gives me the best chance of getting a reload.